Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Noemi Korányi. I'm the Executive Director of Danube Institute, and I'd like to welcome you all at our unorthodox event. We usually have a full house here and all kinds of lectures, but this is a kind of event that we've only had once. This is the second time, I think, this workshop. And it's not only useful, but I can assure you that it's also a lot of fun. I'm not holding any speech now because you will all find out that I'm in need of such a workshop. So I just give the floor to Mr. Charles Crawford, who is a distinguished diplomat and I think he'll talk to you about his career. He also has a great book that you can buy at the end of the event, I think. And I can guarantee that it's really useful for these purposes. In the afternoon, we have a workshop on negotiation. Some of you have already registered. In case you have not registered but you'd like to stay, I think we can also solve that problem because some people just don't show up who register. So have fun and thank you. Charles?
Right. Oh, it's a bit loud. Right, thank you all for coming. I know it's a bit snowy, but there we are. This morning I'm talking about public speaking. Speeches and presenting, but just generally not giving big speeches. But if you have to get up in front of a group, like Noemi there, you have to get up in front of a group and just say a few words. You know, it often happens. Or you're at a wedding, or a funeral, or work, or PowerPoint, whatever it is. And to some degree, this applies to media work as well. If you're talking to the camera, media stuff, some of this applies. So that's what I'm going to do. Why don't you quickly just say who you all are and why you're here, because there aren't many of us, so let's introduce ourselves. Stand up and present.
So I'm Eva Kovac. I'm from Budapest. Actually, I'm an assistant professor at the Crawford University at the National University here in Budapest, and I'm happy to be here.
Great, okay.
Good morning, my name is Samuel Joel. I'm associate professor of constitutional law working in the National University of Public Service and the Crawford University Law School.
Good morning, I'm I'm a student of international relations and one of the interns of the Institute.
Good morning, everybody. I'm head of research at Magnus Gordon's colleague.
Oh, thank you. Madam?
Good morning to you, Mr. Crawford. Good morning, everybody. My name is Marina Sikora. I come from Croatia, and I am working at the Croatian Embassy as a degree.
Boże, Boże.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ivana Marovic. I'm working currently as intern at the Embassy of Montenegro.
Boże, 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 Boże.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sanja Radulović. I work in the Embassy of Montenegro as a first secretary. Dobrodošli.
Šta se dešava ovdje, bre? Puno Jugoslavena. Bože, Bože, Bože. Okay, why are you guys all coming? Why all these Yugoslavs?
We heard great things about
Did you? Okay. Смешно, смешно. Please.
So, hi, good morning.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Lila Lenvai. I'm working at the Mexican Embassy as a press assistant, and I'm very happy to be here too.
Great.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gergő Téglási, and I'm a PhD student specializing in comparative literature and theater studies.
Good morning. My name is Tünde Hagymasi. I am working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the North America Department. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zsófi Erdélyi, and I'm working for the Otto von Habsburg Stiftung.
Good morning, everyone. Gergely Kopázy. I'm an electrical engineer from the construction business. So it might be off topic, but it's not. So I'm very glad to be here.
Great, okay.
I
No, everyone's been done now, I think. Right, anyone else want to speak? Okay, so what's going to happen is we've got 3 volunteers. 3 of you have kindly volunteered to give a little speech at the end, but I hope that the 3 volunteers, I've had a word with them, will be happy to change what they've done in the light of this, if that's what they want to do. So I'm going to give you this presentation, which I've given to the UN and to lots and lots and lots of different groups. And the thing is, it works. This stuff works, whether it's commercial work, diplomatic work, PhD work, it works. You will get things in this that will help you in your life, massively. I can send I think there's a PDF version of it, so you don't need to take notes. I'll send it to Noemi and they'll send it round to you afterwards, which is not the whole thing, but just the key messages, all you need to remember some big things, okay? One of the ideas here, folks, is how to be big. Big. This is the idea. Well, I'll tell you what that means. Right, let's start. And we'll finish on time, in case anyone wants to leave. So this is me. I spent a lot of time na Balkanu, in the Balkans, in Yugoslavia, in Montenegro, and in Bosnia and Serbia. I was in Yugoslavia when it was Yugoslavia. You, the young ladies, can't remember Yugoslavia. I was there. You can't, for sure. And Russia and the end of communism. I spent a lot of time in Central Europe, basically. I never came to Hungary on a posting. Apart from South Africa, I was only in Central Europe. And this is me when I was a baby in the Foreign Office, a long time ago. This is, if you look very closely at this picture, you can see me here. I was the British Olympic attaché at the Sarajevo Zimske Olimpiade in 1984, Winter Olympic Games in Sarajevo in 1984. I was the Olympic attaché living in the Olympic Village. And this is the Canadian bobsleigh team at the Winter Olympics. So I was there as first secretary in 1984, and I went back to Bosnia 600 weeks later, 650 weeks later, as ambassador. By then Bosnia was its own country, but it had had the war, so everything looked like this. It just took 600 weeks for all this to become this. Very fast, all smashed up. And then I met Nelson Mandela in my career, if you're interested. If you're interested in South African politics, you can go on my website and see how I met Mandela. I was in Moscow when all this happened, the siege of the White House. You could hear all the gunfire from our flat. Oops. And here is me in Warsaw giving a speech on my, I think it was my last Queen's birthday party when I was younger and even more beautiful than I am now. And this is an interesting speech because I'm talking partly in English, partly in Polish. So this guy here is the interpreter. So we're going backwards and forwards. Some parts of the speech are in English, some parts are in Polish. And it's 1,400 people. This is a big crowd. And it's outside. So there's quite a lot going on there in terms of the organisation of how's that? In terms of the organisation of a thing like this. And this is one of the things we're going to talk about, is how you link your speech to the occasion. Because a speech in this room, which is a big room, but not too many of you, there's not 500 people here, this is different to a speech outside to 1,400 people. You have to give a different speech, because it's a different sort of thing. And this is the book, so all you have to do is pay, and I will sign it for you. And it's full of, especially, I wouldn't say only for the diplomats, but especially for the diplomats here at the back. I've got some of my diplomatic cables I sent when I was ambassador. So this is my cable reporting the speech made by President Chirac of France in Sarajevo, French and German foreign ministers in Sarajevo. What's this one? President Clinton in Sarajevo, the Pope at Auschwitz. These are the original cables. And in the book, I analyze the speeches from a speech writing point of view, whatever it is, nearly 20 years later. So it's sort of, there's a lot about diplomacy in there as well, but it's also about words and about speaking. If you read the book, you'll find some of this presentation in it. And I've won 2 prizes for speech writing. These are the Cicero Awards. These are like the Oscars of speech writing. This is the best. And the second one I won was for this one, the future of the funeral services sector. Now, this is quite interesting. You know, the most boring subject in the world, well, the most dreary subject is funerals. But even more boring than funerals is the funeral services sector. How can you write a great speech about that wins a prize? Well, the answer is you can write a great speech about anything. Anything at all. This column. You know, well, write a speech about a column. Write a speech about a notepad. Write a speech about a chair. You can write a great speech about anything. That's the discipline. And it's good. It's on the website. You can check it out. It's sort of funny. But it's interesting as well. So this is the first big point, folks. If you have to write a speech, what's your name?
Gergely, like Sergei, but with a G.
Sergei? Gergely? Gregory. Let's say Gregory. I can remember Gregory. If Gregory is asked by his boss to write a speech, the first thing you have to understand is that 99.9% of what you write is written for reading. You write an email, you write a letter, you write a report, you write an analysis, you write a spreadsheet. It's written for people to read it, right? This is different. It's got to be written so that people can speak. They have to read it to speak it, but the point isn't just to read it. The point is to read it, then speak it. And so this is a completely different form of writing. Completely different. You have to say, right, now I'm doing something different. I'm not doing the normal blah, blah, blah I do in the office. This is different. You have to understand that. The language is different. The grammar is different. The layout is different. The tone is different. Because it's got to be like this. You've got to talk. That's the job. And we'll show you examples of this. Now, this gentleman was at the Danube Institute a couple of weeks ago. I was over here for a big conference on the end of communism. Is it Clark Judge, is it? Clark Judge. He was Ronald Reagan's speechwriter. President of America, Ronald Reagan, he was one of the speechwriters for Ronald Reagan. So, you know, Danube Institute gets great people. And so for me, it was a great treat to meet someone of his, you know, his serious person in the speechwriting world, more serious than me. Because he's written at the highest level, lots. And he said something, we're just chatting, and when we're having coffee, and he said, and this applies in America, it doesn't apply in Hungary. It doesn't really apply anywhere outside America. Americans can talk, because Americans love to sell. They love to buy and sell stuff. America, everyone is marketing. It's all marketing all the time. So Americans can sell stuff. Let me just, I've got a great car here, or I've got a great policy here. That sense of marketing with charm and energy and sort of originality, it's really in their DNA. You all know this from talking to Americans. But he said the point about public speaking at this level, when you're writing for Ronald Reagan or someone, is how do you capture the spontaneity of selling? Because if I'm selling to, what's your name? Eva. If I'm selling to Eva, I might want to sell it differently than if I'm selling to Gregory. So, if I'm selling something to Gregory, I'll say, oh, you're a tough guy, you're really like this. And I'll say, oh, Eva, you're so beautiful, why don't you like this? And my tone might be different, whatever. So I might change my approach because of the audience, my spontaneity, and I'll have to adjust that in the moment, because if I find out that Eva doesn't want to be seen as, you know, she doesn't want me to talk about her beauty, she wants me to talk about her strength, I have to adjust. And he wants me to talk about his beauty, not about his strength, so I have to adjust. So how do you balance the spontaneity of selling with the precision you need for a policy speech at the highest level? Because someone like Ronald Reagan, someone like Trump even, someone like Obama, someone like Mr. Orban, someone like Boris Johnson, in varying degrees, they have to be precise when they're giving a proper policy speech. So there's a tension between the sort of the words on the page and the words that come out of the speaker's mouth. This is what he said, and this is the job of a top speechwriter, is to get this right. So typically, folks, the average presentation is somewhere between bad and horrible and okay and boring. The average PowerPoint is bad, let's be honest. Maybe horrible, maybe okay, but probably boring, right? Has anyone seen a boring PowerPoint? No, because all the ones in Hungary are fantastic. I don't think so. So this is the typical speech. And then you get good or very good. And that's okay, that happens now and again. And then you get excellent. How many times would you say in a year you see an excellent speech? Very often? No, not so much. It's quite hard to be excellent. But I'm not interested in excellent. I'm interested in this. Amazing, awesome, astonishing. So what we're going to talk today is about the space about this area here, excellent and amazing. I'm not interested in all this stuff, because then you get other people to do that. I'm interested in this bit, the bit at the very top. How can you be amazing? This is the question. Not how can you be okay. How can you be amazing? This is the question. And in all this, you've got two different things. Preparing the speech. So Tomasz and the others have prepared a speech. And then they've got to get up and give it. Or Gregory has to prepare it for his boss, but his boss then has to get up and give it. So there's two things going on here. You may be preparing it for yourself and then giving it, like the volunteers have done, or they may be preparing it for someone else to give, okay? So there's two different things in all this which overlap. So part of what I'm going to talk about is preparing, and part of what I'm going to talk about is actually giving it. But they have to work together, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Does this make sense? If you have questions, please, folks, or comments, just interrupt as we go along. And if I'm speaking too fast, too bad. I'll keep going, but you'll get the gist of it. Do you understand this or not? I had a big fight with someone on one of my UN courses. He was from Ireland, didn't like the British, I guess. And I said to the group, there were about 30 of them, they're middle-ranking, young leader type people. I said, okay, your boss asks you to prepare a speech. Where do you start? Where do you start? So any of you, your boss asks you to prepare a speech for the boss to give. Where do you start?
I need information.
Okay, you need information. Okay, so what information do you need? Where would you start? You want to know?
The ambition of the speech.
Okay, very good. Yeah, the tone. Yeah, the public. What's that? Basically, he said, you start with the message. I said, no, you don't. Well, I said, you don't have to start with the message. And he said, yes, you have to start with the message. So I said, well, actually, you don't have to start with the message. He said, yes, you do. So we had a stupid argument, and then he got angry and made an official complaint about me. And just a jerk. Why was he wrong? He was completely wrong. But because he was a jerk, he didn't want to admit it. But why was he wrong? Yeah, the message is like the bullet from the gun. Okay, here's the message for Eva. Here's the message for Thomas. Here's the message for this audience, right? But the question is, do you need a gun? Maybe a bunch of flowers is better. You know, you get the message after you've figured everything else out. Don't start with the message, because it might be the wrong message. Maybe this audience doesn't want to hear that message. Maybe it's a waste of time giving that message to this audience. But you've got to go back further first. So there's what you say, your words, and there's how you say it. What, how, tick, tock. Okay? Right, folks. It's not what you say. We have this little saying in English. It's not what you say, it's... I can't hear? Okay, come on. Let's wake ourselves up. It's not what you say, it's... I can't hear that. I'm getting deaf because I'm old. It's not what you say, it's... How you say it. No. It's what they hear. How you say it is very important. But if they hear boring, if they hear annoying, if they hear patronizing, if they hear arrogant, it doesn't matter what you say. You see what I mean? So there's a sort of issue of words, what you say and how you say it, but there's also an issue of tone. And there's also an issue of reputation. If you walk into the room and everyone thinks you are the most arrogant person in Hungary, that's where they're starting. That's sort of what they're hearing. And you're going to have to make a special effort to change that impression. On like this. So what's wrong? There's one or two obvious things are wrong, but there's some things which are wrong which are not so obvious. Until you see, this is the point of this course. From now on, in the rest of your lives, when you see a speech like this, you will know exactly why it's terrible, and you will be very angry that they are making these stupid mistakes. What's specifically wrong with this? Well, there's not much eye contact. What else? But why is there no eye contact? Okay, so he's not catching the attention of the audience. Okay. But why isn't he? What's he doing? Yeah, he's trapped in the paper. Why is he trapped in the paper? Sorry? Yeah. Did you notice the way it's written? It's written in very long... Remember what I said? Written for speaking, not written for reading. It's written to be read. It's like a text. It's like a bad essay. What else is wrong with it? The tone is wrong. Yeah, what's wrong with the tone? Well, there's his voice. But what else is wrong with the tone? Yeah, but by tone I mean something bigger than that. Well, it's boring, yeah, but what else? There's no enthusiasm. What else? Well, there is a sort of... I mean, I've only cut it short, so I don't want to be unfair to him. This is a senior man. He's president of Kazakhstan now. He could give a good speech. He's a Kazakh leader, so he's going to give a Kazakh-style speech. But it could be powerful. This isn't powerful. And it's powerful because of the way it's written. Sorry, it's not powerful because of the way it's written. Did you notice any specific mistakes? I'll tell you what they are, because we haven't got time. One trivial mistake is, if you notice, they wrote it so he had to turn over the page halfway through a sentence. Women and girls can... This is completely incompetent by the speechwriters. Well, the paper looks terrible. Absolutely. It's all scrunched up. But if you've got your you're giving a sort of official speech and you're using notes, turn the page and make that a natural break in the argument. This is what I think. Turn the page, it's this. And you let the page turn become part of the show, not sort of when you're trying to read it. What else is wrong? There are two massive things wrong with it. Massive things.
He had problems with the names at the beginning.
Well, a little bit, but that's not a problem. What's the problem? What's the speech about? What's it about? What's the speech about? Disasters! Does it sound like a speech about disasters, or does it sound like a speech about his tax return? You're talking about disasters. That's what I mean by the tone. This has to sound heavy. It's a big deal. And the other thing at the beginning, he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Mother, I am very much pleased to be here." He doesn't sound pleased. If you use the word pleased, sound pleased. If you use the word disaster, make it sound like a disaster. Duh. This isn't difficult. And the other really big thing is there are no human touches. Just say he got up and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Eva, Maria, Malala, Susan, Angela. These are the names of 6 women and 2 girls who've been killed in disasters in the last week. And here's the name of Jane, and here's the name of Susan, blah, blah, blah. And here are the names of women in the UN system who are helping them, helping their families on the spot. And then all of a sudden, you've got women and girls in disasters together. And then you don't need to talk about the policy and what the UN Secretary General says. You're making it about them. You're making it about the victims. You're making it about the heroes. You're not making it about the UN. So one of the things, if Gregory is asked to write a speech for his boss, and they say, where might your boss have to make a speech? Is that a thing?
Professional conference.
Okay, but about what?
Distribution boards.
Okay, distribution boards. That sounds pretty interesting. Okay, well, so what are the interesting things about distribution boards? And Gregory should start doing some research about, in my auntie's house, does she have a distribution board? Would that be a good thing if she had one? And you make it a bit more human. Bring it down to earth. Do some research. So everything about that was terrible. But it's easy to fix, is the point. Everything about that is so easy to fix. It would take me about 3 minutes to write that speech. People say, "Oh, I didn't have time to prepare." You don't need a lot of time. Just use your heads.
Secretary General.
So don't be boring, folks. This is the first big message. Now look, one of the things, I've said this already, one of the things you have to do is sound big. And if you're going to be small, you have to sound small. And if you're pleased, you have to sound pleased. And if you're worried, you should sound worried. So what I want you to do is get in little pairs. And what I want you to say is, one of you say to the other, "Your oranges are big. My banana, it's small." Or you can do it the other way around. And just practice making small sound small and big sound big. Okay, go on. Get into pairs. I want you to just practice making big words sound big.
We need to use this.
Yeah, use these. Yeah. No, it's not sounding small. Right, you try it. But exaggerate it. No, but make it sound big. It's big. Very good. Yeah, twice as big as that. No, but make it sound small. It's like small. No, but it's not sounding big. Look, stop. You see how difficult this is? You've really, listen, when you're speaking, you've got to put on a bit of a show. You've got to fill the room. The oranges have to sound big. And that banana, pretty small. So you've got to exaggerate. This is one of the things you have to do. And if you're given a text of a speech, or you're writing a text of a speech, when you have a word like big or small or happy or pleased or angry or concerned or determined, when you give the speech, that word has to sound like it is. I mean, you have to do that. That's part of what the job requires, right? So we've covered this. Where do you start? You start with this. This is my new international organization. WGO. And what does that stand for? What's going on? You ask yourself, what's going on? And if you stay for the negotiation class this afternoon, you'll get the same question. What's this negotiation about? What's this speech about? If it's about disasters, it has to be about disasters, not about UN rules, because otherwise it's a mess. And it's like a jigsaw, folks. When you look at a jigsaw, what do you notice? The two pieces are missing. All that work, no one cares because two pieces are missing. So when you're listening to a speech which is bad, it's because the pieces are missing. The UN speech had 10 pieces missing. In fact, all of it was missing. So everything fits: the occasion, the venue, the audience, the message, the tone. The message is part of it, for sure. But you've got to get the occasion, the venue, the audience right. Otherwise, it's just a mess. And so look at this one here. This is the Queen when she went to visit President Bush, first President Bush. And this is on TV in America. All they can see is the Queen's hat. You couldn't even see her face on most of the TV cameras because this thing was too tall for the Queen. It's fine for him. He's from Texas. The Queen's like this. So everything has to fit. But not just the speech and the words and the tone and the audience, but this sort of stuff has to fit as well. Otherwise, you get a big mess. When things don't fit, you get a mess. And this is a massive mess. The whole visit, all they talked about were hats. Because that was all they could see. The first thing the Queen does is be a talking hat. You couldn't see her face because of this. This was a mistake made by the British. The British know how tall the Queen is. They need to fix it. But it's an easy detail. You know, look at this thing here. Well, this is one we always use. It's too big for the Queen. You've got to find a way to deal with that, anticipate it. So here's the different things: speakers, issues, events, audience, blah, blah, blah. The key is to make them sound big. If your speech sounds big, you sound big. And if you sound big, the occasion sounds big, and the audience feel big. We are investing our time in something big. Exactly. It's got to be big. So when you ask someone to do a PowerPoint, you say to them, what size font should you use on a PowerPoint? If you go on the internet and ask about PowerPoint font, it says, well, the best size for a PowerPoint font is what? Well, it says about somewhere between 24 and 36 is the recommended size of a font for a PowerPoint. That is not 36. This is 36. Does it look big? It's pathetic. This is 96. Does that look big? A bit better. This is 96 font. It's already 3 times bigger than the average PowerPoint font. But it's not that big. What about 200? Big enough, not bad. What about 380? Is that big enough? Nah. Sorry? No, it's not too big. This is the right size for a PowerPoint font. 700. But the thing is, look, everyone's smiling. Look at this. Look, if you just look at this. No one cares about this, but this. It fills the room. The whole room is dominated by this slide. So your slides have to dominate the room. They have to be big. And if you have too many words, you can't do a PowerPoint in 700 font, but you might have one word in 700 font, like this, because then everyone's smiling, because it's funny. But this is big. You see the tone of it's big. Look at the tone of this. All of a sudden, you're dealing with something serious. I wouldn't recommend doing a speech like that always. But the interesting thing, it's from Mars Attacks. And this is silly lady, and Martians have come from Mars, and blah, blah, blah. But if you notice, watch it again, and look, it's very short. Look how she makes the words sound like they are. People are suffering. They've come to save us. You know, she emphasizes the key words beautifully. But the point of it is that she's making those words, she's putting emotion in the words as they are. It's a very, very clever little example. Nice. Right, and you start with PowerPoint, right? So the first slide of your PowerPoint is the first thing the audience hear about you. So this is a thing we had in Gdansk, meeting point, blah, 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 2016. I was there to give these young leaders all day of talking. So they had 2 slide things. They had this thing up and then my thing up. And I looked at this and I just thought, oh God, I can't stand this anymore. What's wrong with this? It's sort of, the colours are miserable, the font is miserable. It's sort of okay. It's not the worst. We'll see examples of much worse later on, but this is okay. But is it wonderful? No, you don't think, wow, this is wonderful. So I sat down with them and said, look, let's change this bloody thing. And it took about 2 minutes, and we got this. Polish and Russian young leaders. You know, and all of a sudden, they feel big. But Polish and Russian young leaders, no. There's nothing big about that, is there? But this, bright colours, young leaders in big letters, all of a sudden, it's sort of bigger. See the difference? So your first slide has to be big, because that's the first thing they hear, that they are part of something big, not meh. Do you see the difference? Do you agree with this? I'm not saying this is wonderful. You can do it differently. But personally, I quite like that. I think that it's bold, confident. This is sort of pessimistic. See what I mean by tone? There is a design element in all this, folks, which is, sorry? Well, the colours, absolutely. Yeah, there's something rather depressing about this. You don't walk in and think, this is really going to cheer me up. I'm going to be a happy person because I'm sitting here looking at this slide. But this one, no, okay, this is sort of good. It gives you a push. And it took 2 minutes to do this. There's nothing difficult about this. But you have to think. Right, tent pole. Do you know what a tent pole is? A tent pole is a stick that holds up a tent. So your speech needs a tent pole. So if you're giving a speech about distribution boards, you need a tent pole. You're giving a speech about borders, you need a tent pole. What do I mean by a tent pole? The tent pole is the idea that gives the speech its shape. So that tent pole has 1 stick. This one has 2 sticks. The tent has a different shape. And this one, the stick is on the outside. It has a different shape. the idea of the tent is different depending upon the poll. Okay? So when you're asked to think about a speech, what would be a good tent pole for my speech? I'm not talking about the message, I'm talking about a way to bring the subject to life. So here's one. What are these two people doing? Getting off the bus. And in one of my courses, there was this young lady from somewhere at the UN. She got up to give her difficult decision speech, my difficult decision, 5 minutes. And she started off this way. She said, I got off the bus. I got off the bus. And she used the idea of getting off the bus and getting on her bicycle or whatever it was to talk about how she changed careers. I had to decide, do I stay on this bus because it's safe and warm and it's going in the right direction, or do I get off the bus and go somewhere else? And she used the idea of getting off a bus to talk about her difficult decision of changing jobs. Beautiful. And I'm quoting it 5 years later because it's so powerful. So simple. And here's me in Krakow on TED. If you go on the internet, you can see me on one of these TED Talks a few years back. And the tent pole for this speech was this. Who's an engineer here? You're an engineer. What's this? But what's it a formula for? It's a formula for kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is the energy of a moving object. So if I throw this at you, it will hurt. But if I shoot this at you, it will kill you. Because it's much smaller, but it's got more velocity. So kinetic energy is half of mass times velocity squared. So a bullet will kill you. A chair won't kill you. Because a bullet is very small and very fast. So basically, what I talked about was the trade-off between mass and velocity, between the size of something and the speed of something, and said we lived in a world of mass movements, weapons of mass destruction, mass production. And now we're moving to a world of velocity. And the problem is the EU adds mass and reduces velocity. So the whole speech was about the EU. I had 18 minutes to talk. I mentioned the EU after about 14 minutes. The speech was about the EU, but I didn't mention the EU. I used this as the tent pole. And it was pretty good. I wouldn't say it was perfect. I'd do it differently now, but it was okay. And this is a speech I wrote for an American lady who had to accept a prize. She was in California. She was given a woman's award, and the audience were sort of mainly the wives or billionaires. Everyone there was a billionaire, more or less. Very rich American patrons, women in their own right, or the wives or girlfriends or whatever of men who were billionaires, but everyone there was successful. And she had to talk a bit about international relations at a sort of gala dinner. And I said, why don't you talk about pie? She said, why can't I talk about pie? I said, well, one of the ideas in international diplomacy is, why do we fight about the share of the pie? Why not make the pie bigger, and then everyone has more pie? But if you think about it, if Eva and I are arguing about this pie, just say I have 3/4 and Eva has 1/4, right? Eva's not happy. She wants to have half. I say to Eva, look, let's make a much bigger pie, then you will get double the pie. But if you double the pie but don't change the shares, you get double the injustice. That's the point. You get more pie, but you get more injustice. So she's even more unhappy. So you look at international relations, some issues are simply about growing the pie. But some issues, like the Middle East, are about sharing the pie. That's why it's difficult. Anyway, she talked about pie. And all these ladies were coming up to her afterwards saying, oh, that was really great. I really like the idea of pie. I never thought about pie like that. Blah, blah, blah. It just worked for this occasion. Because Americans love pie. That's a thing. Look at this. Look at the tent pole of this speech. Are you a shark or are you a fish? This kid got millions of views for this video. He's now running his own motivational speaking company with Usain Bolt. He's from Jamaica, you can tell from his accent. He doesn't say ocean, ocean. Be the shark of the ocean or the fish of the ocean. But if you notice, dominate, power. Every time he uses a powerful word, he sounds powerful. And the image is very strong. Are you a fish or are you a shark? What are you? Great question. You see how simple that is and how powerful that is? And this kid's, going to be a multi-millionaire because of that speech. Because it was so good. Because it was so simple. Right, fish or shark? So a very good way, folks, if you're writing a speech, is to think of a simple contrast. Are you a fish or are you a shark? Is this a problem? Is it a solution? Is this good or is it bad? How can we tell? What's the difference? So that's an easy way to give yourself a tent pole, is to come up with two practical things and compare them. Easy trick. Right, we're going to talk about tips and tricks, and we're going to talk about the big picture. So I've just set the scene. We're getting into some detail now. So there's the what you want to say, and there's how you say it. And the message is what you want to say if you're preparing the text, and the how is what I call the structure, the signposts, the story. So this is how you organize the material, and this is what you want to get across. Okay? MSSS. The message. A message can be implicit or it can be explicit. Or it can be both. So you could give a great speech about the EU that doesn't mention the EU hardly at all. Because the message is implicit. But typically there'll be both implicit and, a difference between explicit. Explicit is what you can hear. But implicit is what's there beneath the surface. What you're getting as well, which isn't said. So you need to think when you're writing your speech, what's the implicit message? And this is the point of my book, really, folks. It says, speeches for leaders leave audiences wanting more. The message of every speech, the implicit message is, I want more of that speaker. Eva was terrific. Eva, can you come to our conference next week and give that speech? That was wonderful. You want more Eva. Or if a politician makes a speech, the implicit message is, I'm great, vote for me. I want more of that politician. Or if Gregory makes a speech, which is really good. What's the best result for Gregory from Gregory's speech? He gets up at some professional conference, makes a speech about distribution boards. What's the best result for Gregory? Big clap, blah, blah, blah. The best result is someone comes up and says, I'm from a headhunter firm. Could we have a chat next week? And Gregory says, wow, that's a good result. More Gregory. That's the implicit message of every speech, really. Now, look at this speech here. This is probably, you can make a case, this is the best speech in the world ever. But look at the explicit and implicit messages here. There's lots of points of technique in this. We could analyze this for half an hour. Just have a quick look at this. If you analyze that, it's analyzed in the book. He starts off by saying, guys, let's have a party because we're staying here. And he says, oh, we have enough food, blah, 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 we have enough food. And everyone says, yeah, let's stay. And then he does the thing with the little seeds, squashes one of his own people. And he gets up on the pile of seeds to totally dominate the room. And he says, you idiots, I told you it was about food. It's not about food. It's about power. That's why we're going back. So he starts off by saying, let's have a party because we're staying. And he waits for an opportunity to to turn the whole thing in the opposite direction. He starts off by saying the opposite of what he thinks. And that makes the finish of it all the more powerful. You see how that works? But you see what he did technically. Never mind whether you think it's a great speech or not, but it is a great speech. Beautifully written, beautifully delivered, lots of points of technique. But he starts off by going over there. He said, we're not going over there, we're going there. That contrast is all the more powerful because he's basically tricked them. Now, would you want to give a diplomatic speech like this? Maybe not so much. Maybe you would, I don't know, it could be interesting. But you see, I'm getting you to think about points of technique, different ways of doing this. Right. The tone of a speech. We've talked about the tone of a speech. This one is just a nice one. I mean, it makes me want to cry almost because it's so beautifully done. I mean, it's very nice, that. I've got another video we haven't got time to see where she's giving a UN speech. It's just terrible. It's a bit like that first one, except she's wonderful and makes it better, but it's basically bad because it's a bad text. Whereas here, she's sort of speaking slightly more from the heart. She's probably got some notes. But did you notice when she says proud? You know, it sounds proud. And when she, you know, you started off with 25 million, and now it's, she doesn't say, and now it's 65 million. Now it's 65 million. She makes it sound even bigger by lowering her voice. So when you notice, if you look at the words, you can see this on the internet, but you look at the words she uses and the way she gives those words emphasis, that is what makes that so good. Beautiful technique. So if you're giving a speech, folks, think about when you get to the point where you have a key word, making that word sound big. Very, very specific thing to do. When you get it right, it's wonderful, as you've seen from the examples. And when you don't get it right, it's flat. It's small. It's useless. Can you see what I mean with this, or not? When you watch these things, you can start to analyze them now, because you're looking for specific things. Any speech you now listen to, you can analyze it very, very carefully, because of all the things I've given you. Did it start well? Did they use pauses well? Did they use emphasis well? Did they have a tent pole or not? No. So that's message anyway. That's how you give a great speech, with message. What about the structure? Basically, when a speech is bad, it's normally because the structure is bad. And what I want to talk to you is about structure briefly. So the tent pole gives you your idea, but the structure then helps you deliver it. So the typical way you are taught in Hungary, and in Montenegro, and in Croatia, and everywhere in the world, pretty much outside the US and UK and Australia, wherever, is logic. Hello, my name is so-and-so, and I am here today to talk about disasters. Now, what is the definition of a disaster? Well, a disaster is... And then you give some examples, you explain the issues, you sum up. This is a typical academic, logical way to give a speech. And lots of speeches like this. Typical PowerPoint thing. Just like this. What's good about logic? It's logical. You know where you are. What's bad about it? It's too logical. It's not a speech. It's an academic presentation. So this guy is John Sawers. He was the head of MI6. British spies, friend of mine, and he asked me to help him with his speech. This is the first ever speech, public speech, by the head of MI6. So even spies now have to give speeches, apparently. So he sent me his speech. And he said, will you help me with the speech? I said, sure. And he sent me this stuff, and I said, but John, it's got no structure. And he said, what do you mean? It's got lots of structure. It's got bullet points. It's got paragraph headings. It's all very logical. He was a scientist. He did maths at university. I think maths and something. He's absolutely like this as a person. Very, pleasant, clever. But he said it's got lots of structure. I said, John, it's got no structure. And so we took all his material, which was fine, and rearranged it around 2 questions. Why do we have spies? Can you trust us? And then everyone's smiling because you know where you are. This is what I mean by structure. Are you a fish or are you a shark? The grasshopper guy, the structure of his speech was food, power. That was the structure of his speech. He didn't mention the word power. It's about keeping those ants in line. But if you look at the structure of it, it was, the first part was about food, the second part was about power. It's not about food, it's about power. So, you could organize the grasshopper speech like this, do we want food? Yes. Do we want power? Yes. Or food today, food forever. That's the contrast in that speech. Fish or shark? So you take a question and then you can answer it. And you might play with the form. So you might at the end say, look, I've given you 2 questions. Why do we have spies? Can the public trust us? But maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the right question is, are we any good? Everyone smiles, and you give 1 or 2 examples of are you any good, and you've got them. You've read it. See how that might work? Or you can have contrast. We talked about contrast already. Contrast brings surprise. And contrast brings humour. Are you a fish, or are you a shark? Everyone's smiling. Food or power? Good news or bad news? Problem, opportunity, challenge, blah, blah, blah. Food or control? Past or future? What were borders like in the past? What were borders going to be like in the future? Tick, tock, tick, tock. And this is a big point, folks. Fact or wisdom? When you're giving a speech, don't give lots of facts. Facts are on the internet. Where you add value is wisdom. So 2 or 3 big facts are fine. They're interesting. But they're interesting because they help you explain something big. So I've written a speech for an ambassador from Central Asia. He's asked me to help him with his speeches. And he had to give one, this is in London, he had to give one about, what's this last one about? Can't remember. But in his embassy, when his people write him a speech, it's full of facts. Our country is in Central Asia, the population is so-and-so, we have 8.9% economic growth, and we have, fine, but what's it about? So you strip all that out, and this last one, it was an investment conference. Why should you invest in our country? So the whole conference was about investing in Central Asia, and he had just 5 minutes, because the other countries were the main theme of this conference. He had 5 minutes. In the afternoon, everyone will be sick of these terrible presentations. So I wrote him a little speech which said, look, I've got 5 minutes. I haven't got time to tell you about this. I haven't got time to tell you how we're building new roads. I haven't got time to tell you about how we're opening new power stations. I haven't got time to tell you about the new massive hydroelectric. So I put in all these things by saying I haven't got time to tell you about them. But I have got time to tell you this big fact. We are now in the top 9 investment destinations in the world. So the question is for you. Are you going to join us or not? That's enough for 5 minutes. And it's very light. And he thought it was great and it was fine. Everyone came up to him afterwards and congratulated him. But basically, folks, if you're writing a speech for the Mexican ambassador, what's the wisdom the ambassador can add? Never mind the detail. What's the wisdom of Montenegro? Montenegro, interesting country. Quite small. but maybe very agile. You know, a big country like Russia, it's not agile. Montenegro can be agile, so give some examples of agility. But that's the wisdom about Montenegro, not the information about Montenegro. Can you see the difference? So this is really, really good, folks. I cannot tell you this works. A structure by time. So you might say, Eva, where do you work with?
In the university.
At the university. So just say you have to get up and give a speech about your university. You might say, okay, let me tell you about our university. What was our university like on the day I was born? Or say on the day 30 years ago, say. What was it like? If you walked through the door, what was it like? And then you might say, what will my university be like 30 years from now when you walk through the door? What will be the same? What will be different? And then you say, where are we now then in that 60-year process? What's working well? What's changing well? What's changing badly? You know, how do we assess this 60-year process? And it doesn't have to be 60 years. It can be anything. You know, the day I was born, or the day I joined the organization, or whatever. I helped someone from UNESCO write a speech. And he had to write a speech for his boss. I said, look, find the first ever speech given in UNESCO. The Director General of UNESCO launches UNESCO in 1963 or something. What was in that speech? What did they talk about? And you can say UNESCO in 1963, which is, what's that, 60 years ago. What about UNESCO in 2083 or 2063, 2083? Then all of a sudden you've got 120 years to play with, and we're right in the middle of this. How's it going? What's worked? What hasn't worked? What have we changed? What have we learned? And so what's the structure of this, folks? Yesterday, tomorrow, today. That's the structure of this. Do you see the point? Very big things. Anyway, he wrote this speech and he said, the Director General gave this speech and he said it was the first time at this Director General annual meeting there had been a big round of applause for the speech. Normally everyone just sits there because it's blah, 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 but this was quite interesting. So everyone listened. It sounded big. This is very good at sounding big because you make the time scale bigger. We're not just here to talk about what we're doing now. We're talking about something big. We're talking about a 60-year process. A 60-year process is a long time, right? It's 5,000 weeks. It's not so long. 5,000 weeks tick away. And so you can play with the sense of scale. Is that right? So 60 times 50, 3,000 weeks. 3,000 weeks, not very long. When you express time in terms of weeks, everyone gets freaked out because it doesn't sound very long. A week isn't a very long. We all know what it's like at the end of the week. Where did that week go? Like I said to you, in Sarajevo, I was there 600 weeks later. It's destroyed. It sounds like no time at all. Or you can have scale. I've explained the migration issues. I've shown our approach here. Let's finish with the global picture. Big to small to huge. Or you could have huge to small to big. It doesn't matter. But you can organize your presentation around scale. What are the big things in this? What are the details in this? And what are the huge things in this? And that allows you to sound wise. And again, it makes you feel bigger because you're looking at things from different angles, and therefore you sound smarter and you sound more confident and you sound able to see the big picture. So you've had MSS, message structure. This is signposts. The signposts are when you go from one part of the structure to the other. I've told you about the big picture. Now let me tell you about the small picture. And you make the signposts clear so that people know where they are. That's it on this one. Another way of looking at it is this thing. What's this thing in Hungarian or Montenegrin? It's a hinge on the door. That's a hinge. So that your speech is like this, and then you go, meh, and you turn it over there. So you make your signposts or your hinges very clear. You can change emotional gear. I've told you about the detail. Now, let me tell you what's really the problem here. And that's what everyone wants to know. Or you might show an object. You might hold something up. Look, guys, look what I've got here. This is all part of what I want to tell you about now. Or you can use body language, or you can use silence. The key thing is you keep control by making the signposts clear. Make them big, because then the audience know where they are. They're coming with you on this intellectual trip. Very good. Very good. Because her speech can be divided into two bits. There's a sort of rather sentimental, oh, it's all very difficult bit. And then there's let's go and fight bit. And she smiles. I think the signpost is a smile. She doesn't say, we are at war, gentlemen. She says, we are at war, gentlemen. Because she's a Spartan queen. She loves war. War is good. And if war is good, let's go and fight the war. Stop messing around. The tone of it changes. But very, very good. Well spotted. That's the signpost moment. And you can see, you know, she changes tone, she changes argument, she changes the whole logic of the speech changes there. We've done this. We are at war, gentlemen. Let's fight. Very, very good. And the last one is stories, but we've talked about stories because all you have to do is put some stories in. You know, Mr. Tokayev at the beginning, he could have had some stories about individual women and girls lost in these terrible disasters, but he didn't. So if you can think of a way of distribution boards, bringing it to life, you know, where would you buy a distribution board? Or, you know, what is a distribution board? Is it something I'd have in my house? Yeah. Okay, right. You know, your house, ladies and gentlemen, has a distribution board. Have you ever thought about your distribution board? When you sit down for dinner with your family, do you ever think, my God, we are so lucky to have a distribution board? No, everyone's saying, what the hell is he talking about? And you've got them. You bring it down to their level. That's a story. That's what I mean by a story. Really a bit of human touch. There's lots of ways of doing this. The Americans are wonderful at it. Goes without saying. In the sort of Hungarian context, I think in a lot of parts of the world, they think it's too informal to have a story. But basically, everyone likes a story. You just need to do it well. Right. So we've had big picture, and then we've got tips and tricks. I think now we'll stop for coffee for 10 minutes or so. Then we'll have tips and tricks, and then we'll have the volunteers. And if the volunteers want to talk to me during the break about what they've prepared, that's fine. Can we just have sort of 11 minutes? Very good. Well done, everyone. Thank you.